Myers is walking up, and Elizabeth Lambert would be the third on deck. The three after them would be Megan O'Halloran, Terry Hess, and Jessica Nicholson would be the next three.
Representative,
Mr. Chair,
you may go.
is my mic on?
I believe so.
Committee clerk, you can try harder to say my last name.
Omokunde.
Oh, very good, very good. See, I knew you could do it. So I'll be brief. First and foremost, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Chair, as she returns. I also want to thank the educators and other folks in the community who have come up here to testify today and to be present for this hearing today. I wasn't going to speak. I was just going to voice my opposition to the bills. However, I did see that my good friend, former Sheriff Clark, was here. And I was astonished because he and I finally agree on something. When he said that racism was kind of interwoven into the society that we all live in, I was like, whoa, I think we agree on something. Finally, I know he and I have a former history together at Milwaukee County. However, he and I do agree on that fact. We also are hearing phraseology like white privilege. Personally, I don't like to use that phrase, white privilege, because throughout history, you've had many people, primarily white men, who have gone on and tried to dominate other groups of people. You had the Highlanders and the Lowlanders, you had the Franks and the Germans, you had the Italians and the Sicilians. They're all battling each other for domination. And when you think about it, they were trying to dominate, even Alexander the Great was trying to dominate the world as he understood it at that time. And so what we're really talking about is the attempt at global domination. And what many refer to as white privilege is just being a white beneficiary of that. If you have set up systems that help you to dominate, if you have set up historical reasons that help you to dominate, and then there are people who exist as a result of that, they are the beneficiaries of that. If they are the ones who may look like you or may be in the same ilk as you or are your descendants, they are the beneficiaries of that. And so that's why I don't use the term white privilege. It seems kind of, faint, if you will. But there are folks who are beneficiaries of that. If I am a millionaire and I leave that to my children, they are the beneficiaries of that work that I've done. And so there's a couple things that I want to add to this conversation, Madam Chair and Mr. Chair. When we talk about racism, I don't want to think about it as an individual disease that people get. Racism or sexism or any other kind of ism is kind of like if we were all hanging out by the pool and we were, some of us were swimming deep, other of us were, just, getting waist deep. Other of us just had our feet in the pool. You wouldn't say to somebody, you're wetter than I am. Everybody is wet. If we had the torrential rains last night and, my power's still out at home. If the rain is coming down, everything is wet and you can't escape the wetness that's coming down. So racism in and of itself, nobody is able to escape it. Even if you have black people or non-white folks at the helm of something, they themselves are not escaping. You're not escaping racism by saying somebody black is running this, somebody brown is running this, etc. We have something called anti-blackness, where even a person who is black will view themselves in a certain way and may not have a very glowing perspective of themselves. I think that it's really important that we observe the slippery slope that can happen here as well. If we look at other places that talk about critical race theory, and as the senator from the 7th mentioned, that critical race theory is not even mentioned in this bill. It talks about sex stereotyping and making sure that a white person as an individual is not held responsible for something that someone else who looked like them did. But I think it's really important that we talk about the slippery slope that can happen. There are other parts of the country where they want to change the narrative of captivity in this country, saying that, black people are just migrant workers. They came from other continents to come here and work on large farms, and there were migrant workers there. Instead of talking about the degradation and dehumanization that our captivity was here, and the fact that millions of us died on our way here, and the fact that we were brutalized intentionally so that there would be the element of revolt, or the element of those who didn't want to be captured would be suppressed. And we're talking about lots of the books that people read in university, and the skew that it has. You know, I'm someone who read the Communist Manifesto. I read John Locke, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Aristotle, Plato. I also read Mein Kampf, which was extremely difficult to read. However, these were things that we all read. And so there are all of these perspectives that have taken place that happen on college campuses, and we have these perspectives and we're able to dialogue with them. So I'm wondering if we're saying that parents are concerned what their children are coming home to read. I'm wondering if we're just concerned that we're saying we don't want to be challenged by what our children are learning at school. We don't want to have to come to a point where we have to reconcile with our young people what they're learning at school or the new things that they're learning. We want them to be soundly indoctrinated in the pedagogy that happens at home, and we don't want anything challenging that. Even if that challenge would cause them to rise to greater heights of intellectual wisdom. We don't want that to happen, because we want what happens in my house, we want that to be here. And when you go out into the world, you keep that with you, and you don't let anything that's outside that world challenge who you are, when we know that the experience is the best teacher and you're going to be challenged. And sometimes when you get new information that makes sense, you add that on and then you move forward. And the other concern that I have is the cutting of state funds by 10% from the DOA. It could be a maneuver where you say, oh, well, I think that they're teaching critical race theory in this school. I think they're teaching this, and you can't say that they're not, so we're going to cut their funding by 10%. It may be a budget saver from your perspective. However, you'll use this will be used, if it were to pass, as a way in which to reduce the funds to critical areas of education. And that we have all these teachers here, and we're threatening to cut education funds. We need to be putting more money into our classrooms. And we need to be making sure that the money actually gets into the classroom. When we say we're going to fund education, we need to make sure that it gets into the instruction of our pupils, and they have a robust education, that they learn about many different things. I remember when I was a young person, and my dad, when I would get home from school, he'd ask me if I had homework. I'd say no. Do you have extra credit? No. He'd give me great books to read. Now, I didn't understand them all at the time. However, I grew to understand them more as I got older. And many of them dealt with the beauty and the great transcendence of my people, where I came from, on the continent of Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Because as a young black boy, I was confronted every day in a society that told me I was less than. I was confronted every day in the good old United States of America that told me that I didn't belong, I wasn't wanted, and that I should go somewhere and disappear. And it was an attempt at erasure. And I'm sure that happens for young girls, young black girls, young brown girls, et cetera. And that still takes place to this day. So what we need to be doing is making sure that if we're going to reconcile and do things for the best of America, that we teach all of the history. And I'll close with this. There is a scholar named Dr. Yaba Blay who says, why give us a day off for Juneteenth if you're not going to talk about why we need it? And so we have to give the full understanding. We have to make sure that we're seeing things clearly for what they are and not what they appear to be. That we're giving a full understanding of what it is that we're doing, who it is that we are, and that we don't allow slippery slopes to get us into avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Because if you're talking about the history of the world and the history of the United States, in actuality and factually, you should be uncomfortable. So we want to make sure we're having those real conversations, and that not only will everyone feel uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable and get to a place where they can have a mutual understanding, but that they can also go out into the world and improve it as a whole as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Myers.